A string of brutal robberies rocked South Florida. Two masked men wielding military weapons launched a violent spree that put innocent lives in danger. No one knew who they were or where they would strike next. Before authorities could stop them, lives would be lost, and law enforcement would be changed forever. In Miami, a gang of robbers targeted banks and armored cars. They carried assault weapons and showed no hesitation in using them. They struck in broad daylight, sometimes twice in a single day. For a time, they seemed unstoppable. Former FBI official Jim Kallstrom later reflected that stopping these criminals would demand stealth, ingenuity, and perhaps a measure of luck. No one expected it to become one of the bloodiest chapters in FBI history. Miami, Florida. Two FBI agents had already seen the city under siege. Each week brought 3 to 5 bank robberies. Kidnappings, major drug deals, and shootings had become routine. But just when it seemed the violence could not escalate further, a new breed of outlaws took to the streets and turned the Miami crime wave into open war. An armored car courier made a scheduled pickup at a steak and ale restaurant. The driver waited for his partner to return, unaware that 2 heavily armed men were also waiting nearby. As the guard approached the rear of the truck, the gunmen advanced with military-style precision. The driver refused to open his door and drove away following company policy. The subjects retreated to a getaway vehicle and attempted to camouflage their escape with a military-issue smoke grenade. Metro-Dade police and the FBI responded. Robberies of armored cars and banks fall under FBI jurisdiction. The supervisor of the Miami FBI's Violent Crimes Unit was Special Agent Gordon McNeil. There were basically no clues as to who these individuals were. Agents had absolutely no idea where to begin. No one had seen them without black hoods covering their faces. They wore gloves on both hands. One piece of information witnesses provided was the license number of the getaway car. Agents tracked the number and learned the car had been stolen a month earlier. The lead went nowhere. The robbers escaped with only $2,800. Their use of military weapons and commando tactics convinced Agent McNeil they would probably strike again somewhere in Miami. The answer came just over a week later. At a busy supermarket on South Dixie Highway, another armored car arrived for a scheduled pickup. A courier returned to the truck with several money bags filled with cash and receipts. He never saw the car that came around the corner. The robbers escaped empty-handed. Metro-Dade police and the FBI quickly responded to the alarm. These men were clearly not afraid to use deadly force. The courier would later die from his injuries. While he was taken to the hospital, agents interviewed his partner. As the partner described the gunmen, it quickly became obvious they were probably the same men responsible for the previous robbery at the steak and ale restaurant. No money had been taken in that earlier attempt, but numerous shots had been fired. The level of violence was rising. Ballistics evidence confirmed the connection between the two robberies. Investigators recovered double-aught buckshot from a 12-gauge shotgun, .45 caliber bullet casings, and .223 shell casings. The .223 casings seemed most significant. The FBI Laboratories Firearms Unit compared the shell casings and determined they had been fired from the same weapon. Agents now had a definite link between the supermarket attempt and the steak and ale robbery. 2 violent robberies were tied to the same masked gunman. Still, there were no leads to their identities. Because they had scored no cash at the supermarket and so little at the restaurant, investigators were certain the pair would strike again soon. 2 weeks later, a third robbery occurred, this time a bank job at the Florida National Bank. As a teller and a guard walked from the main building to the drive-thru, 2 masked gunmen emerged from a car. At gunpoint, they ordered the teller to open the door to the drive-thru. She tried to comply, but there was a problem with the key. Stalled in broad daylight at a busy intersection, the gunmen aborted the robbery and fled with only the $10,000 the guard had been carrying. Within minutes, local authorities and the FBI Violent Crimes Unit responded. The scene was just a few blocks from the 2 previous robberies. A pattern was developing. All these crimes were happening in the same general area along U.S. Highway 1. FBI interviews with bank employees confirmed the robbers were the same pair who had hit the armored cars. Perhaps they figured a drive-through bank would be less heavily fortified than armored cars, an easier source of cash. There was no higher priority in this case. Agents had to find these men and get them off the street before they killed more innocent people. Just an hour and a half later, they hit the professional savings bank only 18 blocks away. The robbers quickly took control of the lobby. At gunpoint, customers and employees followed their orders. With their masks and high-powered weapons, no one doubted they meant business. This time they scored big, racing off with over $41,000 that had been delivered earlier that day by Wells Fargo. They escaped in yet another getaway car, a Chevy Monte Carlo. Witnesses had little to tell agents. The robbers had entered quickly and forced everyone down on the floor where they could not see what was happening. Since the men had actually been inside the bank this time, perhaps the security cameras had captured them. Agents were soon disappointed to learn the cameras had malfunctioned and nothing had been recorded. It was the fourth robbery in 6 weeks. The heavily armed robbers were looting banks and armored cars in broad daylight. Witnesses said the men looked like true professionals. The way they walked, the way they talked, the way they carried their weapons. Some agents wondered whether they could be dealing with police officers or very recent ex-military. With such violent criminals on the loose, agents honed their own skills on the firing range. They worked the case relentlessly, exchanging every slim lead. Nothing panned out. 2 months passed without another robbery, and still there were no solid leads. On a Friday morning, William Roberts prepared to make a transaction at the Barnett Bank just as an armored truck was unloading outside. He looked up from his checkbook and watched as 2 masked robbers shot the guard in the back. As the guard lay on the ground, one of the gunmen shot him twice more. This was the robbers' 5th heist in just 3 months, and another big score. They fled with $54,000. William Roberts trailed the men for blocks. Though he kept his distance, Roberts worried the thieves knew he was following them. Still, he stayed on their tail and noted their license tag and car model. He tracked them to a parking lot where they pulled in next to a white pickup truck. Roberts parked across the street and continued watching. He noted the make and model of the pickup but could not see its tag number. After driving off, Roberts flagged down an officer and told his story. The FBI responded to the scene and interviewed bank employees. They recovered several .223 rounds later, determined to have been fired from the same weapon used in the first 2 robberies. Nearby, agents examined the getaway car the robbers had abandoned. William Roberts was the star witness. Thanks to him, the FBI had its first major break in a 3-month string of violent robberies. A check on the license tag of the getaway car revealed it was registered to a man named Aureliano Brielle. Agents prepared to pay him a visit. Since the car had never been reported stolen, they suspected Brielle might be involved. They dressed for safety. In Miami, the FBI had been tracking 2 masked gunmen who had already killed 1 guard. Now agents had located the registered owner of one of the getaway cars. Special Agent Morales and a partner arrived at the home of Aureliano Brielle. A woman opened the door. She asked if the agents were there about her son. When Agent Morales said yes, she replied that her son Emilio had been missing. Mrs. Brielle's husband came to the door and invited the agents inside. Mr. Brielle explained that his son Emilio had disappeared 3 months earlier with the family car, which he had borrowed to go target shooting in the Everglades. The Brielles had filed a missing person report but heard nothing. They had hoped the agents brought news of their son. Both the Brielles and the agents were disappointed. The FBI knew nothing of the young man's whereabouts. As the interview progressed, Agent Morales grew certain the Brielles knew nothing about the robberies. The family were victims, their car had been stolen, and their son was missing. Metro-Dade police processed the Brielle's car while FBI agents observed. Evidence technicians found no fingerprints or anything else to advance the case. The next 2 months were quiet again, though the robbers remained on the loose. Agents worked other cases while continuing to mine every possible resource for clues. Then Special Agent Ben Grogan told a skeptical Agent Morales about a newspaper article he believed was connected to the case. The article reported the attempted murder of a man named Jose Collazo 2 days earlier. Two men had shot Collazo multiple times, then stolen his gun and his car, a black 1982 Chevy Monte Carlo. Grogan swore the vehicle would become the bank robber's next getaway car. While it seemed to some agents like nothing more than a hunch, they respected Grogan. At 53, he was a career agent with 25 years on the job, including time as a SWAT team leader. Colleagues called him the doctor because he could do jobs no one else could. They decided to act on his hunch. Grogan and another agent visited Collazo in the hospital. Collazo was in rough shape with wounds to the side of his head, his arm, and his back. He managed to describe his nightmarish afternoon in the Everglades. He had gone to a recreational trail near a lake where gun owners often practice target shooting. He was preparing his .22 when two men drove up beside him. The driver pulled a gun on Collazo. Collazo somehow had the presence of mind to identify it as a steel blue Magnum revolver. He pegged the other man's rifle as a Ruger Mini 14. When the assailants demanded Collazo's guns, car, and wallet, he complied. But they shot him several times anyway at close range. Then they left, taking Collazo's Monte Carlo and their own F-150 pickup truck. As they drove off, they believed Collazo was dead. Collazo had to decide whether to try to live or simply lie down and die. He chose to live. He picked himself up and walked almost a mile after being shot 3 times to seek help. Finding Collazo was the best break in the case so far. He provided the single clue no previous witness could offer, a description of the suspects' faces. They had not worn masks when they assaulted him. Using Collazo's description, a Dade County police artist drew composite sketches of his assailants. The drawings were made into posters with information about the suspects and their crimes, plus the warning that both men were heavily armed and extremely dangerous. Retired Special Agent Harlan Hanlon, a 22-year FBI veteran then assigned to the Violent Crimes Unit, remembered what Collazo said. Collazo was able to give a description of the men. He also told agents about the white pickup truck. He had been shot in the same general area where agents believed Emilio Brielle had disappeared. In the coming days, agents stepped up their efforts. They conducted a grid search of the streets crossing South Dixie Highway in the vicinity of the bank robberies. After telling his colleagues what he had in mind, Agent Grogan said he wanted them to drive between 88th Street and 185th Street on South Dixie Highway and collect license numbers of every white Ford F-150 pickup truck. Something in his gut told him it might lead somewhere. They came back with the license numbers of 10 white Ford F-150s. Computerized checks would reveal the owners' names. Agents would then request driver's license photos from the Department of Motor Vehicles. Perhaps Collazo could identify the truck's owner from the photos. But in those years, technology moved slowly. Before the photos arrived from the DMV, the robbers struck again. Just 1 week after Collazo's assault, the thieves hit another bank on South Dixie Highway. It was their 6th hit in 5 months. One man kept the terrified customers at bay while the other looted money from a teller. The men escaped with over $8,000 in cash. As customers and employees recovered, an off-duty customs official who had seen the robbers flee called police. He had noted the make of the getaway car, a black Chevy Monte Carlo, and the tag number. Just as Agent Grogan had predicted, it was Jose Collazo's car. They had not even changed the tag. Investigators learned little of value from witnesses. At this bank, the security cameras had filmed the entire robbery, yet the videotape was of little use. The camera's lenses had captured little more than unidentifiable masked bandits. There was little doubt these robbers planned each hit carefully. It appeared they were conducting surveillance of the banks beforehand, because on most occasions they struck within 10 minutes of an armored car company delivering a cash shipment. They waited until the cash was inside and then hit the bank. On a Thursday, Gordon McNeil and Ben Grogan discussed the case at firearms practice, searching for any clues they might have overlooked. It had been about 3 weeks since the last robbery. There were still no clues to the thieves' identities, but McNeil detected a pattern. The only consistent element was that the robberies always occurred on Friday between 9 and noon, always at the same banks multiple times, always within the same roughly 40 square block area, always along South Dixie Highway. Agents planned a surveillance for the next day. They would fan out and patrol the area where the robbers had struck so often. Unit Supervisor Gordon McNeil personally led the operation. Agents could not simply wait for another bank to be robbed. They had to get out there and make their own luck, perhaps find the suspects, and start watching for their vehicle. Many believed it was the long shot, but 14 Miami FBI agents met in a parking lot early on a Friday morning. They would surveil a 53-block grid along South Dixie Highway, where 2 commando-style gunmen had pulled off 3 bank robberies and 3 armored car heists in 6 months. The suspects were described as white men of medium build, one with a handlebar mustache, both about 30 years old. They were heavily armed and extremely dangerous. They might be driving a black Monte Carlo with license number NTJ891. After a robbery spree that had lasted 6 months, Miami FBI agents went on the offensive. They met to patrol an area where the 2 armed robbers had used military tactics to hit armored cars and banks. All would be stationed along the major thoroughfare of South Dixie Highway. Agents Ben Grogan and Jerry Dove were on their way to stake out the Barnett Bank when the impossible happened. A car that fit the description of the suspect's vehicle pulled directly in front of them. In disbelief, Agent Grogan advised all units of what he saw. Gordon McNeil remembers the call. Grogan was not an emotional person. Nothing could get him excited. Yet McNeil still remembers Grogan's voice saying they were behind a black Chevrolet Monte Carlo with Dade County tag NTJ891. Agents Morales and Harlan Hanlon were stationed at the Professional Savings Bank when they heard Grogan's transmission. They began searching for their colleagues. Hanlon was driving while Morales worked the radio. Hanlon tried to gauge Grogan and Dove's location, asking Morales to have Grogan call out cross streets so they would know how close they were getting. Before Morales could transmit, Grogan began calling out the cross streets. They were hitting those streets one after another and getting very close. After proceeding south for several blocks, Hanlon and Morales closed in behind the suspects. The robbers soon suspected they were being followed. Whether they knew their pursuers were FBI or not, the suspects wanted to lose them. They turned right onto 117th Street, into a residential neighborhood that was quiet at that time of day. They turned right again, trying to shake the tail, but the agents hung on, playing for time while waiting for more FBI units to arrive. When the suspects turned onto 120th Street, they actually slowed down. The caravan continued, the agents always concerned about endangering innocent bystanders. Then the suspects made a left onto 82nd Street. It appeared they were heading back to the busy highway, where civilians would be at serious risk if a confrontation turned violent. When Grogan saw the silhouette of a long-barreled rifle through the rear window of the suspect's vehicle, he knew it was time to act. All units stop. Let's do it. It was clear the suspects were preparing to fight. Grogan activated his emergency lights and ordered the felons to stop. They ignored the order. Grogan pulled ahead of them and blocked their escape. Hanlon and Morales moved up, boxing them in. The sight made an indelible impression on veteran agent Harlan Hanlon. He would never forget the man's face. He looked like a classic Western bad man, very determined. It seemed the suspects were as desperate to get away as the agents who pursued them. 2 heavily armed fugitives had ignored FBI orders to stop their vehicle. Special agents now tried to force compliance. The last to catch up was Agent Richard Minozzi. As he pulled behind the suspect's car, he saw one of the gunmen take aim at Morales and Hanlon. Minozzi rammed the fugitive's car from behind. They swung into a U-turn, and Minozzi hit them again, knocking them into a parking area against other cars. The passenger opened fire with a Mini-14 assault rifle. Outgunned, Agent Minozzi crawled to cover. Agent McNeil arrived seconds later, firing at point-blank range. The suspects were surrounded by FBI agents. Their vehicle could not move, but they had superior firepower and refused to surrender. The driver fired a shotgun blast at Grogan. McNeil hit the driver in the neck, but the semi-automatic kept pumping out rounds until one finally caught McNeil in the hand. Morales and Hanlon advanced to cover him. Hanlon's .38 held 5 rounds. The Mini-14 had 30 rounds in each magazine. One of the gunmen shot down Agent Miralles. It was all one continuous blur. 1 second Hanlon was looking at Gordon McNeil's back, trying to maneuver to his left. The next second he was staring at blue sky. He looked at his left arm. It was completely shattered. His partner was down, but the shooter kept firing. When the gunman tried to escape out the window, Jerry Dove hit him in the chest with his 9mm. To Dove's horror, the man still managed to shoot McNeil in the neck. 2 more FBI agents arrived and joined the gunfight. By now, the shooter had been hit 4 times, yet he continued to advance and fire. He had simply made up his mind that he was going down fighting and would take as many agents with him as possible. The agents knew they were outgunned, firing 6 shooters against the suspect's 30-round semi-automatic assault rifle. Dove and Grogan were forced to retreat behind their car to reload. Hanlon reloaded as well, but the shooter kept coming. A round went through Hanlon's knuckles on his right hand and through the knuckle of his thumb. More lead struck the back of his arm, and his gun went flying. As Hanlon tried to retreat under the bumper, the gunman shot him in the groin. Blood geysered from his groin to his knee. Grogan was hit, then Dove, before they could reload. Hanlon heard Grogan say, "Oh my God," as he fell. At some point, Hanlon heard the breath go out of him. The subject made his way to Agent Dove's car. With his left arm nearly blown off, Agent Miralles managed to pull himself up. The shooter was trying to flee, and Miralles had to stop him. Mortally wounded, the second suspect somehow dragged himself out of the car and joined his partner. If the car started, Miralles knew they could only go in reverse and back over the fallen agents. Eventually, Miralles grew angry. He knew internally that he was dying, and his one last thought was that if he was going to die, he would take these men with him. With his shotgun empty, Miralles switched to his revolver and staggered forward, firing at the subjects. His shot struck the men in the spine, killing them both. It was a violent end to the lives of 2 violent men. Just a few minutes after it began, the bloodiest firefight in FBI history ended in tragedy. 2 agents were dead and 5 wounded. 2 suspects, still unidentified, had also been killed. Agent Jerry Dove lay dead. At the age of 30, he had earned a law degree and fulfilled his boyhood dream of joining the FBI. He wanted to make a difference and gave his life trying. His partner, Ben Grogan, had also perished. He had been just 1 year away from retirement when his wife could finally have stopped worrying about her husband's dangerous career. Crime scene technicians arrived at the site. Metro-Dade County Homicide Bureau. Sergeant David Rivers was also there. Rivers faced the enormous task of reconstructing 5 minutes of living terror, a process that would take weeks. Technicians recovered 143 bullets fired from the fugitives' weapons. Questions that had plagued agents for so long were finally being answered. The Ruger Mini-14 rifle used to kill agents Grogan and Dove matched the 223 bullets found at some of the armored car and bank robbery scenes. The FBI crime lab could now forensically link the killers with several of the earlier heists. From fingerprints, agents soon identified the subjects as 32-year-old Harlan Lee Platt and 34-year-old Cole Russell Maddox. One question remained: what kind of men had wreaked this destruction, and why? Agents could not have been more surprised by what they learned from the killer's friends and neighbors. Instead of outlaws living on the edge and prepared for the ultimate confrontation, Platt and Maddox were known as quiet family men. Photos showed their families relaxing together. Platt had a wife and 3 children. Maddox was a single father. They were partners in a landscaping business. Further investigation revealed the lie of their double life. Inside a shed, agents found guns and ammunition, including the .22 Maddox and Platt had stolen from Jose Colazzo when they tried to kill him in the Everglades. Agents also uncovered evidence of a bizarre murder pact in which the men may have killed each other's previous wives. No one had been charged in those 2 cases, but now they would be reopened. Within days, agents confirmed that Maddox and Platt had killed 25-year-old Emilio Brielle in the Everglades. A hiker found Brielle's skeletal remains in the Everglades, not far from where Collazo had been assaulted. Then another tragic footnote surfaced. Special Agent Steve Warner received a package from the Florida Department of Motor Vehicles. In it was a copy of Cole Russell Maddox's driver's license. He was the owner of one of the white Ford F-150 pickup trucks agents had located weeks earlier. There had been a delay in sending the licenses. If they had arrived on or before the day of the surveillance, Collazo would have been able to positively identify Maddox, and agents probably would have arrested both Maddox and Platt before 2 FBI agents were killed. That was not how events unfolded. The FBI investigation revealed that both killers had served in the military. Platt had been a Ranger, a member of the Army's elite First Strike Force. That background explained the pair's commando tactics, which were fundamentally different from training received by law enforcement. Law enforcement is taught defensive shooting. Take cover, do not take casualties. Platt reacted in military fashion. He had the heavier weapon, the Mini-14 with 30-round capacity. With his back against the wall and no place to go, he advanced forward on the agent's position, laying down suppression fire and ambushing Grogan and Dove, who were behind their car. As agents finally put the pieces together, a frightening portrait emerged of 2 formidable adversaries. At the end of the shooting, Platt had been hit 11 times. Maddox had been hit 6 times. Platt was literally shot to pieces, yet he kept fighting until he ran out of breath. They were going to die. They simply were not dying fast enough. They were not prepared to lie down and die. They were not about to give up. Out of this tragedy came positive changes that improved the safety of everyone in the law enforcement community. Agents and officers now carry more powerful weapons, and their training better prepares them for violent confrontations like the one that occurred that Friday morning. As hundreds mourned the deaths of 2 dedicated and selfless FBI agents, those in law enforcement searched for meaning in the tragic events of that day. Over the years, Gordon McNeil found some resolution. The story is not about Platt and Maddox. It is not important who they were. What matters is recalling the courage shown by the agents that day and by the FBI as a whole. They did their job.